Thank Michael Billig for doing so much davening this morning as well as reading Torah. As well, I want to thank Michael Katz for reading Torah this morning as well. And of course, Rabbi Berman, always doing such a wonderful job. And of course, we wish a refuah shlema, a full recovery. Please, quickly, cantor. That's not a knock on you, Michael. That's This week was Hanukkah, of course, and Hanukkah had many, many programs this week. We could have used her, but we thank Marcia Lane, who is our religious school director, for pitching in so much this week. And last night's service was really very delightful. So really wish the cantor will come back soon. So I don't really like the word trigger. I really don't like the word triggering. And worst of all of those, I hate the phrase trigger warning. And the reason why I don't like them is because they actually describe something that is so true. But it's overused today. And the moment you realize that you are triggered, that becomes actually a moment of extraordinary empowerment. Now, the problem today is it's often used as a manipulation in the same way that the phrase virtue signaling is used as a manipulation. And so it bothers me, but I'm already way off course. So back to triggering. It's a two-way street. We trigger and we can be triggered. We can say things and do things and express things that trigger somebody else, but we are equally triggered by things that happen around us. But once you realize that, you recognize something that's going on internally for yourself. And our Parashat this morning, I think, offers us a roadmap for how to overcome whatever it is that has triggered us, whether it be fear or anxiety. This morning's Parashat shows us a moment of extraordinary anxiety and the ability of an individual to overcome it. And then he's able to move on with his life just in the same way that we're able to move on in our lives. Since the beginning of the war in Israel with Hamas and the subsequent rise in anti-Semitism, everything to me sounds louder. Every image that I see seems more threatening. Every person I see on television who looks like a Muslim, I listen to and parse every word. If I see a young man on the street with a shaved head, I wonder if he's a neo-Nazi, a skinhead. And I know that's not a rational response. And I know that normally I'm a much more thoughtful person, not really judging people by their looks. But as Jews, we suffer from national PTSD that's brought on by centuries of hatred and anti-Semitism. From the Chmielnitsky massacres to the Holocaust, I believe our genetic code as a people has been rewritten in order for us to be attuned to even the faintest hint of anti-Semitism. We have developed a keen listening ear to hear the drums of war when they're very far away. For us, the canaries of the world, were afraid at the hint that they're coming after us. Pittsburgh, for us, was not an isolated event. For us, Pittsburgh was a pattern that led to Poway, to Jersey City, to Muncie, to Bal Harbor, to Los Angeles, to Colleyville. That is terrorism. And it doesn't just happen in Israel, it happens for Jews all over the world. And that's why I believe we are uniquely skilled at seeing it, at feeling it, at responding to it. So as I said to the chair of the humanities department at Mercy, who I had a conversation with this week. She has an expert coming to speak to a group of women faculty about the unique pedagogic skills that they embody as female professors at the university. It just so happens that that woman is a Muslim. And many of the women Jewish faculty objected to her coming, even though she wasn't going to speak about anything to do with the Middle East. And so the chair of the humanities department asked me, what is going on? These are intelligent women. Why would they object to a woman coming just because she's a Muslim? And I said, it's because we're in a heightened moment of tension. And everything to us sounds louder because we come to it with a history of people who hate us. That's just, unfortunately, an irrational response, but it is who we are. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out that the anti-Semite mutates, that over the course of time, anti-Semitism has taken many different forms, and we have become uniquely qualified to identify it. And our response to it has to be vigilant and rational. So I always wonder, though, will there ever come a time where we as Jews don't have our bags packed and our passports up to date? Because we're always afraid that the other shoe is going to drop. Maybe just something from this morning's Parashat offers us a glimpse of light. Maybe this week's reading offers us some pathway back from trauma. Because if we can't find a way back from trauma, then we are forever trapped. So this morning's Parashat says, Ve'et Binyamin achi Yosef lo shalach Yaakov et achav, ki amar pen yikra'enu ason. In this morning's Parsha, we have the story in which Joseph demands Benjamin to come back with his brothers, and Yaakov, his father, their father, says, there is no way I'm letting Benjamin go. Since the beginning of the story, we know that Jacob is suffering from the worst kind of PTSD. And so the Parsha tells us Jacob wouldn't send Benjamin to his brother Joseph since he feared that he might meet with disaster. We know why Jacob holds Benjamin back because we know the whole story. We also know that Jacob holds Benjamin back because he lives in the backdrop of Joseph he thinks is dead. And that is something from which a parent never returns fully. And we imagine, and we know the suffering of parents who have lost children this week. Because the story seems to be a quick progression, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that there are many years that lapse between Joseph's disappearance and his reunion. And we know that every day we imagine that Jacob is replaying the story about how he lost Joseph in the first place. We don't recognize the amount of time it took for us to get to this moment. In that time, Joseph goes from boy to man, to captain of industry. And all the while he is growing, his father is declining. Jacob declines, he diminishes, he devolves. Joseph matures, but Jacob ages. Joseph grows, but Jacob shrinks. You see, that's what trauma does to people. It robs them, it steals life from them, and it makes a person wonder, when is the other shoe going to drop? And so Jacob sees now the other shoe about to drop. He is afraid that Benjamin will meet the same fate as Joseph. But Rashi points out something remarkable. He says, "Uvavai lo yikra'enu." Is it possible that nothing could ever happen to Benjamin while Jacob is keeping watch? Rashi says it's irrational. Disaster strikes everywhere. It's not limited to a location. We see it everywhere. And Jacob thinks that he can protect his child? Look, that's the job of every parent. Every parent thinks that they're going to take care of their children in such a way that no harm will befall them. But we know all too well that's impossible. After already losing a child, the backdrop on which he lives the rest of his life, Jacob becomes more aware of the fragility of life and the vigilance necessary to protect. And so Rashi says to Jacob, here's a reality check. Disaster can happen anywhere. And it can happen under your own watch. The truth is, that's what we all need, is a reality check. We need to ask ourselves, of every fear that arises in our hearts, is this reasonable? When so many draw parallels between America in the 21st century and Germany in 1939, we must ask ourselves, really? Are we in the same place we were back then? Look, I recognize the fear. We come by our fear honestly. I can even imagine a rabbi giving his sermon back in 1939 on this Shabbat in Germany and making a case that things are different then than they had been in our past. Look, my reality is I was born after the Holocaust, and I was raised in a world that already knew the state of Israel. And I think now is different than it was in Germany, even with a 388% increase in violence and hate crimes towards Jews. But I don't have a bag packed, even though I have a passport that's up to date. Jacob, having experienced the loss of a child, thinks, of course it can happen. And to the question of if it could happen again, he responds, of course it could happen again. It's a feeling that every parent feels as they put their child on the school bus for the first time and drop their kid off at college or leave them at camp. Until now, every parent says, this child has been under my protective wing and I'm afraid to let them go. I can only think about that bus filled with that band that went off the road and so many were killed. It's the dread that every parent feels the first time and every time after that they give their child the car keys and then wait for them to drive into the driveway at the end of the night. How many parents hold their breath until they see those headlights pull into the driveway? You see, that's what we feel as a nation. We never truly feel safe as Jews, even in America. America has been the greatest bastion for our people, but now we see the anti-Semitism rising. In a conversation this week with Israeli soldiers about to be deployed, a colleague of mine prayed for them for victory and a safe return. To which the soldiers said to this colleague of mine, based on what we're reading and hearing and seeing with the rise in anti-Semitism in America, we're more afraid for you than we are for ourselves. At least in Israel, there is a Jewish army. The story of Jacob and Benjamin doesn't end here. Benjamin does eventually leave the protection of his father's house. He undergoes an ordeal in Egypt, but he survives. And the reality check is, so do the Jewish people. We always survive. Where mighty empires have fallen, we survive. We just finished the holiday of Hanukkah, the reality of the story of the meek overcoming the great. The Maccabees defeating the Greeks in a 25-year war. It didn't happen overnight as we would imagine. We Jews have always played the long game. So, in the interim, this is what I want you to do. Positive self-talk. Challenge negative thoughts and replace them with more positive and rational thoughts. As Rav Nachman of Bratslav taught us, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. Rav Nachman of Bratslav says, no, we live in a very narrow bridge. But the main thing is not to fear at all. And then the second thing I ask of you this morning is share with trusted individuals. Open up to friends, family, and support groups about those things that are happening around you that frighten you. Come and talk to us. Have a support network, because that can make all the difference. We need to say out loud what we're afraid of, and we need to talk to each other in a supportive and loving way. So come here regularly and sit with us in our pews. Sit with your chevra at Kiddush and talk about what's going on in your lives and what's going on in the world. It's normal for us right now to feel anxious. I hear you, and I am ready to listen even more. And I say, in response with absolute certainty, we're not going anywhere. Because as my nephew, who is currently stationed in Gaza, who sent me a video this week, said, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Od Avinu Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu 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 Chai. We survive. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf, page 184. Chatzi Kaddish, please rise. Yitgadal, v'yitgadal, Shemei Rabbah, v'yalemadi v'rachirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon, v'yomechon, u'v'chayedechol beit Yisrael, v'agala, v'agala, u'v'zman kariv, v'yimeru, amen. Yeshmei Rabbah mivorach, Le'olam le'omei omaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal,